Hi, it's Michael Kerr here, presenting Small Business Banter. A healthy micro and small business sector means a successful economy and a more vibrant society. Small Business Banter is about helping regional business owners better prepare for current challenges, but also for the next stage of business success. I'm Michael Kerr, founder of Kerr Capital, advisors to business owners. Each week, I interview a fellow small business owner or an expert, and they share their stories, their lived experiences, the wins and the losses, and their best advice to help you, the listener, get the most you can from your own business. Small Business Banter is brought to you from the studios of 104.7 Gippsland FM and is heard across Australia on the Community Radio Network. And thanks also to Kerr Capital, supporters of the show. So welcome this morning to another edition of Small Business Banter Radio and Podcast. Great to have in this morning Philip Volk. Morning, Philip.
G'day, Michael. Good to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
Oh, it's excellent. I'm really looking forward to our discussion on succession planning or exit planning, for SME owners, which you're doing a lot of work in. But if you wouldn't mind, just to set the scene, give us a little bit about, you currently run 4 businesses and a succession planning business is a key one of those. But if you could give us a little bit of a rundown on your background to set us up, and then we'll get into a discussion on succession planning.
Yeah, okay. Thanks, Michael. Look, I grew up in the country. My dad started as an apprentice printer and ended up managing and then building some of the biggest printing companies in Australia. So I guess the sort of business gene was inherited. I started my first business when I was 16. It was a business called Fim Foam, imaginatively named as a conjunction of my name, Philip, and my friend's name, Tim. We cut blanks of foam, which we got from Franklin Caravans, into packing for the local tool and die making company. And to set the business up, we had an old door, a couple of bits of pine and some nichrome wire, and Tim's dad was the city engineer, so we were able to on weekends get the battery charger, the truck battery charger from the local council depot to make the nichrome wire hot, and then we cut the foam. So that was my first business.
Excellent. And now you've got 4.
Yeah, look, I went away and joined the army. Learnt a lot about people, about leadership, about process, about management. Had no real commercial experience. Probably the most commercial thing I did was audit the wine cellar in the officers' mess. And I spent 20 years in the army, and it was actually a very, very good background for the sorts of stuff that I do now. And that I really learnt a lot about people, and so from leading soldiers to talking to generals. And the businesses I own now are actually all around wealth, but I don't mean necessarily in a money sense. I actually mean wealth in terms of what are you getting out of life. So
just give us a quick rundown on the 3 of them, because they're all other than the succession planning one, because they're all quite related.
Yep. So probably the one that I've been in the longest is a business called Horizons Wealth, and we're personal wealth advisors. The way we describe that is we co-steward the dreams of about 350 families, and we help them to dream again and then connect their money with their dreams. Another business is a back office business for financial planning businesses in Sri Lanka. So that came out of a mentoring relationship I had with a young fellow that worked for me in one of her businesses, and he went back to Sri Lanka and wanted me to help him get that started. So that's, a successful business. Was in that for about 10 years. I've been coaching businesses for about 15 years, so coached several hundred businesses, mostly in the financial planning and accounting space, but latterly in other areas as well. And then there's the succession planning business. So we found that when we were coaching businesses, we were doing a lot of succession planning. And then so we joined with Succession Plus. So Succession Plus is a national organisation, fastest growing and probably the most prominent succession-focused business in Australia.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I track them closely and know them, and obviously know you well. They're doing a terrific job of leading the charge, and it is, the area of succession planning for small businesses is one that gets quite a bit of, I guess, negative attention in a sense, because a lot of owners, by most of the stats that come out, haven't really got around to doing formal or timely succession planning. So is that a fair assessment of the?
That's absolutely right. That's absolutely right. So the majority of business owners don't deliberately succeed out of their businesses. Mostly it's accidental. And so what tends to happen is they get so wrapped up, and we know how small business owners work and think. We are that. So we know how passionate we get about our businesses, and it becomes a part of our identity. And so a lot of small business owners can't even conceive of what is it that I'm going to do when I stop doing this. There's a lot of businesses, they don't succession plan, and the way in which the succession happens is not always a good experience for the owner or for the staff or the clients.
Yeah, it's a terrible experience, when it's completely unplanned. So there are a couple of things you mentioned there. One of which is owners, and we love small business. That's why we do this program to bring more quality experts and perspectives on small business. But people get very caught up in the day-to-day. So it's understandable that starting a succession plan, can look like another major project, and something to put off until tomorrow. But also this idea of identity and what do I do afterwards. I think that's a particularly important one, because for a lot of owners who have been in businesses for 20 or 30 years, it very much defines them, and you understand why the thought of not having that in your life can be another reason to say, well, look, I'll get to that later.
A bit like if you bring it back to something that we should all be doing, but many of us don't, is actually having our own estate plan, our own will. And it's I'm here for a long time. It's actually difficult for me to think about or conceive of me not being here. And by actually having to do your own personal estate planning, that actually brings it front and centre. And I think that's the same for small business owners. If I don't address it and I don't think about it, then it's not a problem. But it becomes a problem.
Yeah, it does. What would you be saying to those owners listening in that are thinking about succession planning? What's like could you draw on some experience of those accidental or unplanned exits that really hit home for you, where the owner perhaps said, "Look, if I had my time again, I'd do something quicker."
Let's take the positive step. As we work in both the personal wealth space, but also the succession business wealth, if you like, business planning. And whenever someone does some financial advice with us, the predominant thing that they say afterwards is, well, two things. Firstly, gee, I'm really relieved. I've got a plan. And secondly, I wish I'd done that 10 years earlier. And I think that translates really well into the small business space as well. You need a plan, and you need to start as early as you possibly can, or you're going to end up in what we would call an involuntary succession. So the older you get, statistically, it is much, much more likely that you'll have an involuntary succession. One of the businesses we're working with at the moment, one of the partners is a financial advice business. He is 85. And then there's a whole bunch of changes happening in the regulatory environment. And, he was not wanting to be a part of any sort of succession plan because of, he saw himself as the business. So, start early is the big message, I think.
Yeah, start early. Can you talk about just at a high level for the minute, what's involved in a succession plan? And I'm assuming we can use the term exit planning, interchangeably with succession planning. I don't want to get too technical, but
maybe if I describe the sort of the process, the succession planning process, if it's done properly, and then a part of that is the exit planning. So let's just talk about the 5 sort of major steps. Is firstly, you've got to identify what value you've got in the business. So, what's it worth? What are the gaps? And then secondly, it's how do you protect that value? Because the issue with most small businesses is that if the founder and owner isn't there, the business either will fail to grow or won't be there. They are the business. So that's about protecting the value, so de-risking the business by actually creating, using the resources that are in the business or bringing resources in so that the business continues independent of the owner.
Yeah, I think that's, in a practical sense, it's, in the work I do, it's the biggest single factor. What happens when the owner leaves to the business?
It's a really good comment, and I see it time and time again. And in my own businesses, I've, over the last 4 or 5 years, been very deliberate about recruiting and training people. And the training in business is not that difficult. The thing which most of them don't get is leadership training, so training them how to be better leaders. So first step we said was identify the value, what's it worth. Second was protect the value. And then it's how do you maximise the value in the business. And you need time to do that. There are often things, in fact almost inevitably things which can get tidied up to make the business more valuable and more likely to be successful.
Which is one of the reasons why when we say, and we both know from a lot of experience, that you need time to properly succession plan, and one of the key reasons is, there's you go through all the steps that you're part way through, but you often see where things can be improved or need to be fixed before it's sellable. So that's just why that you can't just flip it around in a month. We're talking years, really, aren't we? When we do it well and properly.
Yeah. Look, and the sooner you start, the better off. The wealth business that I started, I was 50 when we started. Then I had partners that were in their 40s and 30s or late 20s. So I actually built the succession plan into the partners that I chose. I chose them not just for their ages, but also for their character and the fact that we actually liked each other and were able to work together. So we have in that business, always had a succession plan and are now working towards executing that. So,
that's the foresight there is quite striking. That starting a business and having in mind where it might go. I mean, I think that in an ideal world that would be what everybody does, but most typically I expect you're dealing with owners who have found themselves in business and have gotten 20, 25 years down the track and are looking at doing other things.
And pretty typically in those sorts of businesses, you end up with the owner at sort of the right-hand end of the scale in terms of experience and impact, and then he's got a bunch of people working for him, but there's a pretty significant gap often between the owner and the people that are working for him or her. And because they haven't done the leadership training and the development of those people to actually create the next generation of leaders in their business. And you need to be deliberate about that. That's a part of the protecting value or de-risking the business. Is making sure that the rubber band between the owner and the people actually doing the work in the business, or most of the work in the business, is not stretched too far.
Yeah, I expect also probably that your the work you do on leadership is partly about getting owners ready to make that leap themselves and mentoring and actually letting go.
Look, that's right. But I think those conversations are actually really well executed by financial advisors. So it's the financial advisor that's saying to the that's asking the business owner, what's important in life to you? What do you actually want to do that you don't have time to do at the moment? And then beginning to do some experiments and free up time to do that creates, if you like, an alternate vision of the future for the owner.
Yeah. You sparked something. Sorry, by the way, on today's edition of Small Business Banter Radio, we're talking with Philip Volk from, amongst other things, a partner in Succession Plus. Philip, you were just about to, I think, jump into another of your steps in the process.
Yeah, I might just give an outline of the 5 steps, and then we'll put exit planning sort of in context. So we've spoken about identifying value. How much is the business worth? What are the gaps in it? Protecting the value. How do we actually cover some of those gaps? What are those gaps that we need to cover? So maximising the value. So it's a continuation of the protecting the value. So it's identifying how much does the individual business owner need to get out of the business, and how do we cover that gap between what it's currently worth and what he needs or she needs to actually get out of it financially. And then that can drive some of the different exit strategies that we might have. Fourth one is really where the exit event occurs, which is the extract value. So it's the liquidity event or the transaction. And then the fifth one is how do you manage the value? So sort of 2 sides to that: manage the value in the existing business if the owner stays partially in it, but also manage the personal wealth that has been derived from the extraction event or the exit. In your experience, are most businesses able to be improved with the right time and advice? Yeah, absolutely. What happens is, as business owners, we get sort of really head down, bum up in the business. We spend a lot of time working in rather than on the business. I know that seems glib, but we find that most owners are actually blind to some of the things that can be done reasonably simply to improve the value of the business. And the challenge is a lot of those challenges are around them not thinking of what their alternative future is, and how do I actually get people trained and recruited and upskilled to take over some of the roles that the owner would currently have. Yeah, it's quite fascinating. This again, it comes back to being so deeply involved in the business. The business is what it is to the owner at the time, and then you go through a process of preparing the business, selling the business, and you find that each buyer that comes in sees it very differently. They've got their own unique circumstance, and I think one of the keys when you get to that phase of exiting out of the business, selling it's understanding that how you see your business could be quite different to the value it might bring to different kinds of buyers. It astounds me every time. Yeah, well, you've seen it a lot, haven't you? I think one of the things too, which we get great joy out of, is when we see some sort of internal succession, or a part of the succession is actually internal. You may have another investor or owner coming in, but by actually working with the staff in the business and creating what we call an ownership mindset, so helping them to understand, how do I think and act like an owner? What are the tools that we put in place to allow them to improve the processes and upskill themselves? And what are the financial rewards, and how do we link those financial rewards from the business back to these staff that can become minority owners through the business? And we've got various structures we can use to do that. Yeah, I think it's a real trend in from the owner's perspective, and that a key team of staff are a natural buyer of the business. You cut out a lot of things that you would go through if you had to sell externally. But you introduce a different set of issues, and the one that was particularly interesting is this owner mindset, and it's
it's one thing to be a really excellent employee, but another to continue to be that and take on, put another hat on as owner and at risk, if the business.
When you sort of dive into businesses, you start consulting them, consulting with them, you often find that the answers, in fact, almost always find that the answers for the problems are in the business, the answers are in the staff, and it's freeing them up to actually understand and be able to provide those answers, and for the owner to be able to do something with them. There's a series of steps, what we call a ladder to equity, where you might have a bonus and some profit share, and then at the top end, some of the staff actually owning the business either directly or through an employee share ownership plan, which is a very, very tax effective way of transferring control, some control or all control. So the all takes some time, but transferring control and for the owner to actually get their money out of, or the money that they need out of the business.
And does that create an environment where the owner doesn't necessarily need to get out in one hit? They can stay involved, which can be good for them, can be good for the team buying in?
Spot on. That's exactly what happens. So as the team takes more responsibility, the owner, and often what they give up is stuff they don't like doing. And so what we've found is that the business actually continues to accelerate its growth because the owner is focused on stuff that they do like doing. They prolong their time in the business, but it's often the real value-adding stuff, the rainmaking side of things, so finding new clients and that sort of thing. But if they're not having to do all of the processing or manufacturing type work, they've got other people doing that. It keeps their wisdom in the business longest, which works for the business and also for the owner.
Yeah, it's taking a step away and looking at what the business needs by way of employees, and if you can relieve, focus any individual employee on what they're best at, the business, benefits.
We've talked a lot about internal succession, and that's absolutely one of the ways to go, but there's also external succession. But there's also a mix where you can actually do some internal succession so that the business can be run what we would call under management. So someone could come in and invest in the business as an investor or as an owner operator, but the key staff are actually tied in, and that's a good way of actually doing it through an employee share ownership plan or some sort of equity plan.
Okay, all right. What's your couple of top tips for right now? We're in challenging times. Is that really making a difference to the way businesses are selling, or is it still about getting on with your succession planning?
There's a couple of things happening. The current times have created headwinds for some businesses and tailwinds for others. It's a business we're working with which runs major events or provides the infrastructure and support for major events. Well, that's obviously a real challenge for them at the moment in that they're unable to actually, run those events. Whereas there are other businesses, for example, a textiles business which provides supplies for people making quilts, which has just gone gangbusters. So the businesses have, there's not a lot in the middle. It's either going really well or not so well. What it's also done, and this tends to happen in economic downturns, is when there's another set of stresses on the business, those business owners that are a bit, getting towards closer to the end than the beginning will say, look, I've had enough of this. We need to find a way to get out of here. But what you don't want to do is run out of puff as a business owner and have the market choose the time or for there to be an involuntary succession, because firstly, you're unlikely to get what the business is really worth to you, and secondly, it's not as likely to be a successful succession in terms of the business continuing.
Yeah, so you can see why it just needs time. and I'd encourage all owners listening in to take that in, because there's a lot that can be done with good advice and time. In terms of succession planning as a profession is quite unique. It's emerging strongly. Succession Plus are doing a great job. So one thing I've always found is for owners is pick your advisors well. It's not succession planning, selling a business, exit planning is not a routine, or the people that do that kind of work. And the best ones do it all the time and do it for their own living. So, just be mindful of that. Philip, we're unfortunately out of time. Thank you so much for your time today. I think that's incredibly instructional, and you've laid out for us and owners, a pretty compelling case to start the process. So, I really appreciate your time.
Thanks, Michael. And just, biggest tip for business owners is get started on your succession plan and do it as early as you possibly can.
Yeah. And if you look, by all means, shout out if they wanted to, make contact with you, it's successionplus.com.
Yeah. So my business partner and I, Vicky Massey, and myself, Philip Volk, would be very, very happy to have a chat with you and just see where you're at and what we can do.
Yeah.
Find someone that you've got chemistry with, that you feel like you can trust, because it's a journey. But also find someone that does this a lot. You only get one chance to sell your business.
Yeah, do it properly. So that's a great way to finish. Thanks again for your time, Philip.
Good on you, Michael. Thanks very much for the opportunity. Take care.
So that is all for today's episode of Small Business Banter. I continue to be inspired, bringing you small business experts and other small business owners and hearing their stories. If you want to listen to any past episode, jump onto your podcast platform of choice and search Small Business Banter. There you will find a diverse and fascinating collection of small business owners and experts openly discussing and sharing their experiences. For any of the links, resources, or information we've talked about on the show today, or to contact me, please head over to smallbusinessbanter.com, or you can find us on Facebook and Instagram. And it would be great to have you tune in the same time next week for another episode of Small Business Banter.